Hello, and welcome to Kaylee's Nightmares, a podcast that delves into the bizarre, chilling, and terrifying stories of myself and our listeners. I am your host, Kaylee. Today's author is Reddit user CIA Herpes, who also writes as J.H. Salem. Story is narrated by myself. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and hide under your covers. This is My Father Always Kept the Shed Locked. Today, I found out why, part 3. We walked through the hard-packed dirt yard, looking down the grassy field behind the house to the rolling hills that stretched as far as the eye could see. They began to grow blue, pale, and fuzzy near the horizon. It was a beautiful place to live, and hard to imagine something so evil might be right in the middle of it. The shed loomed up ahead of us, boards tightly hammered together and freshly painted on a dark red color. The shingles on the small roof all looked relatively new, and the door was expensive and sturdy. I stood in front of the door, listening for sounds of any movement, but there was nothing. I fumbled in my pocket for the key, pulling it out, looking at Gil, who stood close by my side. Then I shoved it in the lock and opened the door. The shed was dark, as if a curtain of shadow fell over the open door. I stuck my head in, feeling around for the side for a light switch. That was when something grabbed my arm. I screamed, ready to pull my hand out and run, and then I felt the light switch on the wall. I flicked it on quickly. There was no one in there. Shaking, I turned to Gil. "Something grabbed me," I whispered. He nodded, unsurprised. Then we walked into the shed together. The walls inside were all covered with plates of sheet metal. Every square inch of the shed was reinforced with steel, including the roof, which had a flat pane of metal going straight across the shed, welded to the floor that covered the walls. Only the floor was unprotected. It was just a plain dirt floor with a hole in the center. Looking closer at the protective structure of the shed, I saw deep claw and gouge marks raking the metal surface, even those on the bottom of the ceiling 8 feet above the floor. Something had clearly been in here and wanted very badly to get out. I inched closer to the hole in the floor, which took up most of the floor of the shed. It was at least 10 feet wide. Looking down, I saw spiraling steps descended in a clockwise fashion as far down as the light extended. I found a small rock on the ground outside, came back in and dropped it down the center of the stairway. I listened for it to hit the bottom, counting the seconds on my watch. After about 30 seconds, I realized it wasn't going to. Maybe it was too far down to hear when the stone connected. I looked over at Gil. He was standing as near to the door as he could get, looking like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. I gave him high marks for courage, though. There was something wrong in here, and I could feel it. Outside, it was a warm and fresh breeze, blew the smell of flowers and pine through the yard. But in here, it was cold and oppressive. A freezing chill seemed to come from the hole in the floor, spiraling up with the stairs and running over my body, sending a feeling like ice running up and down my back. "Do you want to go first, or should I?" I said, gesturing to the hole. Gil stared at me as if I had gone mad, his eyes widening. "Why in the fuck should either of us go?" he said, raising his hands and using them to gesture wildly as he often did when he was upset. I shrugged. "This is our property now," I said. "We need to at least know what's on it, don't you think?" But there was another reason, too. It was sheer curiosity and a desire to prove to myself that there was nothing supernatural going on here. No monster in the closet, just the overactive imagination of an old man. Gil sighed. "Fine," he said. "I'll go. Go grab 2 flashlights and Dad's gun. Maybe some extra batteries. Some extra magazines, too. Better safe than sorry, after all." We both went inside the house together, leaving the shed door wide open. And that was when I believe something got out, and then the killings in town began. We descended the stairs slowly. They were stone, slick in some places. There was no guardrail or any protective barrier, which made my heart beat a little faster. I liked something to hold on to. If I took a tumble on these stairs, I might keep falling forever. We heard strange sounds from below periodically, but when we shone our lights down here, we couldn't see anything. Echoes rose around us, sounding at one point like kids playing a game of hide and seek, at another like the howling of a wolf. Strange squeaks and clicks would also arise intermittently from the shaft below us, and then stop as quickly as they had started. The noises got louder as we descended dozens of stories, then hundreds. It seemed like the stairs would keep on going forever, until we hit the mantle of the earth and got burned up. Then a door appeared, painted chip blue with a fading daisy at the center of it. I looked at Gil and swung it open. Beyond it, a hallway with fluorescent lights extended as far as the eye could see. Countless rooms went off it to the left and right. The lights flickered on and off, sending portions of the hallway into darkness. The floor was falling apart in many places with strange molds and fungi growing out of the wood. White and black molds battled for space, forming huge colonies that were bigger than my shoe. I walked forward, putting my weight gingerly on the floorboard. It creaked slightly and felt wet under my shoe, yet it held my weight. "Come on," I said to Gil, who followed closely behind. As soon as we had walked a few steps down the hall, the door slammed shut by itself behind us. I jumped and turned, pulling out the gun reflexively. Gil put a hand on my shoulder, pushing the gun back down. "It's okay," he said. I was breathing hard, my heart hammering in my chest. Maybe that's why I didn't want to hear the counting at first. But as we walked down the decayed hallway, the lights turning on and off above us with every step, I realized that someone was counting, and it had been going on for a while. It sounded like the voice of a little girl.
40, 39, 38,
she said, counting off the seconds. I heard giggling from the rooms around us, but I couldn't see anyone. We kept walking forward, but that counting was getting on my nerves. Not least because it couldn't for the life of me tell where it was coming from. We checked the rooms to the left and the right. There were broken tables, old office equipment and chairs in nearly all of them. Some of them had fish tanks, but instead of fish, they had plumes of multicolored molds growing over the top of them. Or in one case, a dead and dried out turtle.
"One, ready or not, here I come."
The girl's voice screamed gleefully, and that was when all the lights went out at once. We quickly fumbled for our flashlights, turning them on at the same time. I heard the gun in one hand crisscrossed with a flashlight in the other, a trick I had seen used in cop shows. Gil had a 10-inch Bowie knife in one hand, which he had just removed from the massive scabbard he had around his leg. In his other hand, he held his flashlight, which he frantically shone back and forth, up and down. "Geez, calm down with that thing," I said. "You're going to make me dizzy." "Something's coming," Gil whispered back, a note of dread in his voice. "Don't you hear it?" I stopped, listening hard. Indeed, I heard footsteps nearing, small suppressed giggles, the swishing of a dress. My flashlight illuminated a pale face, a little boy sneaking a peek out of the nearest room. He was filthy, covered in black soot with torn clothing and what looked like blood caked into his hair. He looked up at us quickly, then withdrew into the room. For the first time, I felt genuinely scared. Now we could be certain that we were being watched. "Hey," I whispered, running into the room after him. Gil followed close behind me. The footsteps seemed to be right next to us now, but I looked around, not seeing anyone. Then a blur of movement passed by as the little girl ran over to the little boy, where he was curled in the corner under a broken folding table, crying and shaking with terror.
"Found you,"
she said. I shone my light directly at her back, seeing a pale blue dress, but I couldn't see her face. "Get away from that kid," I yelled. She ignored me, bending down quickly, and before I knew what had happened, she had ripped the boy's throat out with her teeth. She turned to look back at us, and I saw that her face had been cut off, and now only a grinning skull remained. It was covered in a thin sheen of blood, and two tiny white pinpoints of light seemed to glow inside the empty sockets of her eyes. With her teeth full of flesh and gristle and fresh rivets of blood running down her skeletal mouth, she continued to cry.
"Found you, found you, found you."
Without hesitation, I shot her in the shoulder. She fell back half a step, turning to look at me with that skeletal grin, then spun around and continued eating the little boy. He was still alive, choking on his own blood, his huge eyes coming over to me as he died, as if accusing me of being the cause of all this. The sound of his last gurgling breaths were the only sounds now. I shot her again, but she wouldn't go down. A blossom of blood began to spread outwards on her back where I had shot her, but she showed no pain. Gil grabbed my shoulder tightly. "We need to get out of here," he said through gritted teeth. I nodded. We ran back to the door we had come in through, but it was locked tight. The lights were still off. I told Gil to take a step back and then tried shooting at the lock. The bullet ricocheted crazily as if I had shot a reinforced army tank rather than a plain wooden doorway. Next, we tried kicking it open, but it was as if it were fused to the wall. I turned to look at him and the truth passed between us in a glimpse. To get out, we would have to go farther in, where there was likely even worse things waiting for us. Thank you for listening, and if you want to add to the podcast, which is a collaborative story platform, please enter your own story at Kaylee's Nightmares on Facebook, r/Kaylee's Nightmares on Reddit, or send it by email to kayleesnightmares@gmail.com to have your story read on the pod. If you have any ideas you want to see made into a story, please feel free to send as well. To support my work, donate to Kaylee's Nightmares on Patreon. If you like today's story, please follow and support our author today at Reddit CIA Herpes. Next episode should be out next week. Thank you, and have a good night.